Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today, we're really plunging headfirst into some, well, pretty fundamental questions.
Absolutely. The kind that keep you up at night, maybe?
Yeah.
What can we really know for sure?
Yeah, exactly. And does anything even exist apart from our own thoughts? Can we actually be certain of anything?
It's a radical place to start, philosophically speaking. And our guide for this is René Descartes.
Right, and the text we're digging into is his 6 Metaphysical Meditations.
Yes, specifically this fantastic 1680 English translation by William Molyneux. And what's really cool about this edition is it includes objections from Thomas Hobbes.
Oh, brilliant.
And Descartes' replies right alongside them. So you get the whole debate.
Perfect. Built-in philosophical sparring. Molyneux apparently described the book as aiming for, mathematical certainty in proving these deep truths.
And honestly, he wasn't kidding. It's incredibly rigorous. You'll see.
Okay. So our mission for this deep dive, then?
Well, we want to walk you through Descartes' whole process, step by step. His method of doubt, how he finds certainty, how he builds everything back up.
And tackle those objections, especially Hobbes.
Exactly. The aim is for you to get a really clear grasp of the core ideas, the really influential bits, without getting bogged down for weeks.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Let's unpack this. And it starts with a pretty extreme method, right? Radical doubt.
It really does. Descartes kicks things off by looking back and realizing, a lot of the stuff he believed since he was a kid turned out to be false, or at least shaky.
We've all been there, I guess.
Totally. So he feels this need to just clear the slate, demolish everything, and build knowledge fresh, but this time on a foundation that's absolutely solid.
It's like finding out your house is built on, I don't know, quicksand. You've got to tear it down to the bedrock.
That's a great analogy. But, checking every single belief individually, that would take forever.
Impractical.
So his method is smarter. He doesn't go after every little belief. He attacks the principles, the foundations they rest on.
Ah, okay. Target the roots.
Exactly. And if he finds any reason to doubt a foundational principle, even a tiny one, he'll treat everything built on it as basically false for the time being.
Okay, so what's the first foundation he goes after?
Our senses, the most obvious source of information, right?
Yeah, seems like a good place to start.
He points out, look, our senses have definitely deceived us before. Maybe about things far away or things that are really small.
True. Optical illusions, things looking different in the distance.
Right. And he says, well, simple prudence suggests you shouldn't completely trust something that's fooled you even once.
Fair point. So, general distrust of the senses, but hang on. Surely I can trust them about things right here, right now. I am certain I'm sitting here talking, seeing this equipment. That feels undeniable.
And that's exactly where he hits you with the dream argument. It's famous for a reason. He asks, how can you be absolutely 100% certain that you are not dreaming this entire conversation right now?
Oh, well.
Are there any totally reliable signs, he asks, that let you distinguish being awake from being asleep and dreaming? He argues there aren't. What feels incredibly real could just be a very vivid dream.
Whoa. Okay, that is unsettling. Seriously. What if this is just a dream?
That's precisely the feeling he's aiming for. But he doesn't even stop there. He pushes the doubt even further.
Further? Where else can he go?
He conjures up this possibility, this hypothesis of an evil deceiver, or sometimes it's called an evil demon.
Okay, that sounds ominous.
It is. Imagine a being, he says, that's incredibly powerful, incredibly smart, but also malicious. And this being is using all its power just to trick him.
Right, so a cosmic trickster.
Exactly. And if such a being exists, then even the things that seem most certain, things you grasp with your mind, like basic maths, 2 + 3 = 5, or that a square has 4 sides, even those could be illusions planted in his mind by this deceiver.
Wow. Okay, so first the senses, then maybe I'm dreaming, and now even basic logic and math could be fake. He's really doubting everything.
Everything. Senses, body, external world, even the truths of reason. It's total, systematic, radical doubt. He's wiped the slate absolutely clean.
So what's his move then? Just live in doubt?
No, his temporary strategy is to actively fight against his natural urge to believe all these doubtful things. He decides to pretend, just for the sake of the argument, that all these things he's doubted are altogether false and imaginary.
Just assume they're all wrong.
Right, just to see what happens. What, if anything, can possibly survive this onslaught of doubt?
It feels like he's backed himself into a corner. If everything is doubtful, what's the point? How does he get out?
But that's the genius of the method, you see. The point is to find that one thing, that single solitary truth that is so certain it can withstand even this universal hyperbolic doubt.
Like Archimedes needing one firm point to move the world.
Exactly that analogy. He says he's searching for just the least thing that is true and indisputable. If he can find that one certain point, maybe he can use it as a foundation to rebuild everything else.
Okay, so the search is on. If my body might not be real, the world might not be real, math might be a trick. What is left? What possibly survives?
And that brings us right to the core of meditation, too. He's sitting there, hypothetically stripped of everything, no heaven, no earth, no body, no shapes. And he asks himself, is there still something that exists amidst all this doubt?
And the answer has to be, well, the doubter itself.
Bingo. The very act of doubting or thinking or being deceived, whatever mental activity is happening, proves that there must be an I who is doing the doubting, thinking, or being deceived.
You can't doubt unless there's something doing the doubting.
Precisely. He puts it famously, I am, I exist, is necessarily true whenever he says it or thinks it. You can doubt what you're thinking about, but you cannot doubt that you are thinking. The thought proves the thinker.
Okay, I think I get that. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. That's the one.
That's the bedrock. The Archimedean point he was looking for.
Oh, okay, so something exists. This I that thinks. But what is it? Is it my brain? My body? What kind of thing is this I?
Great question. And this is where Descartes makes a really crucial and honestly controversial move. He's already decided to doubt the existence of his body and senses, remember?
Right. Those are still on the doubtful list.
So this I that he knows exists can't be defined by the body or senses. It's not about nutrition or moving around or even sensing in the physical way, because those seem to need a body, which he's still doubting.
So if it's not physical, what's left?
What's left, he says, is the thinking itself, the cogitative faculty, the ability to think. This, he argues, is inseparable from him, from this I that exists.
So fundamentally, I am a thinking thing.
Exactly. He says, I am only a thinking thing, that is to say, a mind or a soul or understanding or reason. And he doesn't just mean it's an activity. He considers this thinking thing to be a real, existing substance.
Okay, substance. That sounds philosophically loaded. What does he mean by that?
Yeah, it is a key term. Basically, for Descartes, a substance is something that can, in principle, exist on its own. It doesn't depend on anything else for its existence. He thinks there are two fundamental kinds of substance. Mind, whose essential characteristic is thinking, and body, whose essential characteristic is extension, taking up space.
Ah, so mind and matter are two totally different kinds of fundamental stuff.
That's the idea. Identifying himself purely as a thinking substance at this stage is a huge step. It sets up his famous mind-body dualism, the idea that the mind is fundamentally distinct from the physical body.
Wow. Okay. And thinking for him isn't just like doing math problems, right? It's broader.
Much broader, yeah. Thinking includes basically everything that goes on consciously in the mind. So doubting, understanding, affirming, denying, willing, refusing, imagining, and even sensing considered purely as mental events.
How can sensing be part of thinking if he's doubting the senses?
Ah, good point. He makes a really important distinction. Even if the object you think you're sensing isn't real, like maybe you're dreaming you see a light, the mental act of seeming to see the light, the sensation itself as a thought, is undeniably happening in your mind. That act of sensing is a mode of thinking, and it's part of you, the thinking thing.
Okay, got it. The experience is real even if what it refers to isn't. The mental activity is certain.
Exactly. And he uses the famous wax example to really drive this home.
Ah, yes, the wax. How does that work?
Okay, so he takes a piece of wax, fresh from the hive. It has certain sensible qualities, right? A specific shape, maybe a slight floral scent. It's hard, cold. You tap it, makes a sound.
Yep. Standard beeswax properties.
Now, bring it close to the fire. What happens?
It melts. It loses its shape. The scent probably changes or disappears. It gets soft and warm. It won't make a sound if you tap it.
Right. All those sensory qualities change dramatically. Yet, Descartes says you still know it's the same piece of wax.
Yeah, of course it is.
But how do you know? It's not through the senses, because all the sensory information has changed. It's not through imagination either, he argues, because you can't possibly imagine all the infinite shapes the wax could take as it melts.
So if not senses or imagination, then what?
He concludes that you grasp the essence of the wax, that it's something extended, flexible, changeable through an inspection or beholding of the mind only. Your intellect understands what the wax fundamentally is, beyond its changing appearances.
So the mind perceives the underlying substance, not just the sensory detail.
Exactly. And the key takeaway for him is that this mental act of understanding the wax actually reveals the nature of his own mind even more clearly and certainly than it reveals the nature of the wax itself.
Yeah.
The act of knowing confirms the knower.
Which leads him back to the idea that the mind is better known than the body.
That's the punchline of meditation, too.
Mm.
His conclusion, my mind, this thinking thing, is known more truly, more certainly, more distinctly, and more evidently than my own body or any other external object. Trying to know the world paradoxically confirms the self first.
Okay, that's a big claim. And I remember you said Hobbes jumps in right about here.
He sure does. Hobbes basically says, hold on a minute. He challenges Descartes' quick move from I am a thinking thing to saying this thing is mind, a soul, an understanding reason, implying something non-physical.
What's a Hobbes' issue with that?
Hobbes thinks that's bad reasoning. He compares it to saying, I am walking, therefore I am the walking itself. Just because you perform an action doesn't mean you are the abstract action.
Oh, okay.
Hobbes suggests that knowing I exist because I think might just mean that thought is something a physical thing does. Maybe the thinking thing is just, thinking matter, like the brain. He's pushing a materialist view.
Right. Hobbes thinks everything is ultimately physical matter in motion, so he's resisting this idea of an immaterial mind.
Exactly. Descartes pushes back, clarifying that mind or soul refers to the thing that has the capacity to think, the substance, not just the act of thinking. He also points out he hasn't actually proven immateriality yet in meditation too. He says he'll do that later.
Okay, so he acknowledges the point, but tables it for later proof.
Right. But he insists that thinking acts and bodily acts, like having shape or size, are just fundamentally different categories based on different essential properties, thought versus extension. He feels the distinction is already clear enough to know the thinking thing isn't defined by extension.
Okay. So Descartes has found his certain starting point. I think, therefore I am. He exists as a thinking thing, but he's still kind of stuck inside his own head, philosophically speaking. How does he get back to knowing about anything else, like the external world he doubted? Or God?
That's the next major hurdle. To escape solipsism, the idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist, he needs to tackle that lingering doubt from the evil deceiver. Could he be tricked even about his clearest thoughts if he doesn't know where he came from?
Right. If his creator is a deceiver, then even I think, therefore I am could be suspect, or at least its implications.
Or certainly anything he derives from it. So, to secure any further knowledge, he feels he absolutely must figure out if God exists, and crucially, whether God could be a deceiver.
He needs God to guarantee the reliability of his own clear thinking.
Exactly. So his next step is to look inside his own mind again, at the contents of his thought, his ideas. He sorts them into different types. There are ideas themselves, like mental pictures or concepts. There are wills or affections, like desires or emotions. And there are judgments.
And he says only judgments can be truly false.
Right. Specifically, the judgment that an idea in my mind accurately matches or represents something existing outside my mind. That's where error creeps in.
Okay, and where do these ideas come from in the first place?
He considers three possibilities. Maybe they're innate, just built in. Maybe they're adventitious, coming from outside through the senses. Or maybe they're made by him, fabricated by his imagination.
Like imagining a unicorn.
Exactly. He focuses on those adventitious ideas, the ones that seem to just arrive, seemingly from external objects, whether he wants them to or not. But he reminds himself from Meditation 1 that his belief they come from outside was just a blind impulse, not real knowledge.
And those ideas might not even resemble the things causing them, like his example of the sun seeming small.
Right. So just having an idea that seems to come from outside doesn't prove anything outside exists or what it's like. He needs a stronger argument.
How does he build that argument from inside his own mind?
He uses what's often called the causal adequacy principle, or the principle of sufficient reason for ideas. It's a cornerstone of his argument for God.
Okay, causal adequacy principle. Break that down.
The basic idea is that the cause of something must have at least as much reality or perfection as the effect. That seems intuitive for physical things, right? You can't get something complex from something utterly simple without an adequate cause.
Makes sense. You can't build a house from a single grain of sand.
Right. Descartes applies this not just to things, but to the content of ideas, what he calls their objective reality.
Okay, objective reality versus formal reality. Those terms need clarifying.
Yeah, they're a bit technical, but the distinction is key. Formal reality is the reality a thing has just by existing. You, me, this microphone, we have formal reality. Objective reality is the reality an idea has, insofar as it represents something.
Mhm.
So my idea of the sun has a certain objective reality because it represents a huge, powerful star. The idea itself is just a mental state, with formal reality as a thought. But its representational content, objective reality, is that of the sun.
Got it. Formal reality is just existing. Objective reality is the reality represented in the idea.
Perfect. So Descartes' principle is, the cause of an idea must have at least as much formal reality as the idea has objective reality. The cause has to be real enough to produce the representation.
The cause has to be as big or perfect as the thing the idea is about.
You got it. Now he applies this to his idea of God.
Okay.
He finds within his mind this idea of God, a being that is infinite, eternal, all-knowing, all-powerful, supremely perfect, the creator of everything. This idea has immense objective reality. It represents infinite perfection.
Right. It's the idea of the ultimate being.
Now he asks, could I, René Descartes, a finite, imperfect, doubting being, be the cause of this idea?
According to his principle, the cause needs as much reality as the effect.
Exactly. And his own formal reality as a finite, imperfect thing is far less than the infinite objective reality contained in the idea of God. A finite cause cannot produce the idea of infinite perfection.
So, I can't have created the idea of God myself.
That's his conclusion. The cause must be something with at least as much formal reality as the idea has objective reality. And the only thing with enough reality to cause the idea of an infinite perfect being is
An actual infinite perfect being. God.
precisely. Therefore, God must exist as the cause of the idea of God within him. He argues this idea is the clearest, most distinct idea he has, and its source must be God himself. It's an innate idea planted there by God.
Wow. Okay, that's one argument. But you mentioned he has another one later, the ontological argument.
Yes, in Meditation 5, this one works differently. It's based on analyzing the essence or definition of God, similar to how mathematicians analyze the essence of shapes.
How does that work?
Well, think about a triangle. Part of its very essence, its definition, is that its angles add up to 180 degrees. You can't conceive of a triangle without that property being true. It's inseparable from what a triangle is.
Okay, yeah. That's just part of being a triangle.
Descartes applies similar reasoning to God. He considers the idea of God as a supremely perfect being. What attributes are essential to supreme perfection? Infinite power, infinite knowledge, and, he argues, existence.
Existence is a perfection.
He argues it is. A being that had all other perfections but didn't exist would be less perfect than one that did exist. Therefore, existence must be part of the very essence or definition of a supremely perfect being.
So, just like having angles sum to 180 degrees is part of the definition of a triangle, existing is part of the definition of God.
That's the core of the ontological argument. You cannot conceive of God as supremely perfect without also conceiving of him as existing. Existence belongs to his essence. Therefore, God necessarily exists. He claims this is as certain as any truth of geometry.
Two different lines of reasoning, both concluding God exists. And why is proving God's existence so absolutely critical for the rest of his project?
Because it solves the evil deceiver problem. If God is supremely perfect, then God must also be supremely good and therefore cannot be a deceiver. A perfect being wouldn't engage in deception. That would be an imperfection.
Ah, so a perfect God is a non-deceiving God.
Exactly. And if God is not a deceiver, then God wouldn't have given him faculties like his reason, his ability to perceive things clearly and distinctly that would systematically lead him into error when used correctly.
So God guarantees that his clear and distinct perceptions are true.
That's the linchpin. The rule becomes, whatever I perceive very clearly and very distinctly must be true. This rule is validated because God exists and is not a deceiver. Without that divine guarantee, even seemingly obvious truths could still be doubted. The deceiver might be tricking him. The certainty of everything else rests on the certainty of God.
Okay, that's a massive philosophical structure he's built. God is the ultimate guarantor of knowledge. I bet Hobbes had something to say about these God arguments.
Oh, absolutely. Hobbes was deeply skeptical. He questions the whole idea of degrees of reality. How can an idea have more reality than another? He asks for a clearer explanation.
Seems like a fair question.
And Hobbes really doubts whether we even have a genuine idea of God in the way Descartes claims. He suggests that words like God, infinite, omnipotent are just names we use, perhaps derived from reasoning about the limits of our experience, like seeing power and extrapolating, or seeing things created and inferring a creator. He thinks they aren't clear, distinct, innate concepts.
So Hobbes thinks it's more about language and inference from experience, not innate ideas.
Pretty much. He also takes aim at the innate idea concept itself. If these ideas are innate, why are babies thinking about God? Or why don't we think about them when we're asleep? He dismisses the ontological argument too, basically seeing it as playing with words. Just because we link the name existence with the name perfection doesn't mean the thing actually exists.
How does Descartes counter Hobbes on these points?
Descartes clarifies his broad use of idea. It means any object of thought, not just a picture. He explains innate means we have the faculty or potential to form the idea from within, not that it's always present. He defends his causal principle and insists the idea of God is unique and clear enough. And he stands firm on the ontological argument, arguing that for God alone, essence and existence are inseparable, dismissing Hobbes' critique as missing the metaphysical depth.
So the debate continues, but for Descartes, he's now established 1. He exists as a thinking thing. 2. God exists and is not a deceiver. Now finally, can he get back to the external world? Do physical things exist?
Yes, that's the big payoff in Meditation 6. Armed with the cogito and the non-deceiving God, he revisits the existence of material things.
How does he approach it this time?
First, he looks at imagination again. He can imagine extended things, shapes, sizes, motions. This power seems different from pure understanding and seems linked to something bodily. But, he admits, maybe it just relies on his own body, if he has one. It doesn't strictly prove external objects exist.
Right. Imagining isn't proof of external reality.
So he turns back to the senses. He recalls how vivid and crucially involuntary his sensory perceptions are. Sensations of light, sound, heat, pain. They seem to come upon him whether he wills them or not, very different from ideas he creates himself.
Their involuntary nature suggests an outside cause.
Exactly. He has this passive faculty for receiving sensory ideas. There must be an active faculty somewhere that produces them. This cause could be himself, unlikely as they're involuntary, God directly, or corporeal substance, physical bodies.
Okay, how does he decide between those?
Well, he argues God has given him a great propensity, a very strong natural inclination, to believe these ideas come from external corporeal things. And since God is not a deceiver,
God wouldn't give him that powerful natural belief if it were false.
precisely. Therefore, the cause must be what he's naturally inclined to believe it is. Corporeal things. Physical bodies exist. The external world is real.
So the non-deceiving God bridges the gap between his mind and the material world via this natural inclination.
That's the core of the argument. God guarantees the general reliability of this deeply ingrained belief.
But wait, if the senses are now generally reliable, what about all the times they do seem to mislead us? Colors looking different in different light, sticks looking bent in water, phantom limb pain. If God isn't a deceiver, how does error happen?
Great question. Descartes addresses this directly. He says we can be certain about some aspects of bodies, the ones we perceive clearly and distinctly through the intellect. These are the properties studied by mathematics. Extension, taking up space, shape, size, quantity, position, motion, duration. These are the real quantifiable properties of matter.
The stuff of geometry and physics.
Exactly. The other qualities, color, sound, taste, pain, heat. These are what he calls obscure and confused. They don't necessarily represent the essence of the external object accurately. They arise from the interaction between the external object and our sensory apparatus, and crucially, from the union of our mind and body.
Ah, so those secondary qualities tell us more about how things affect us than what they are in themselves.
That's a good way to put it. And this brings him back to the mind-body relationship. He reaffirms they are distinct substances he can clearly conceive of: mind, thinking unextended, without body, and body extended unthinking, without mind. This conceptual separability proves their real distinction.
They could exist apart.
Yes. But he immediately stresses, in our actual human experience, they are not separate. Nature teaches him, through feelings like pain, hunger, thirst, that he isn't just lodged in his body like a pilot in a ship.
Right, not just observing and steering.
No. He says he is very closely joined and, as it were, intermingled with it, forming a single unit. These confused sensations, pain, hunger, etc., are modes of thinking that arise specifically from this union, signaling what's beneficial or harmful to the mind-body composite for its preservation.
So pain isn't a clear perception of bodily damage, but a confused signal from the union saying, hey, something's wrong here.
Exactly. Its purpose is practical, for survival, not for giving geometrically precise information about the body's state. So sensory errors happen when we misuse these signals. We make intellectual judgments about the external world's essence based on sensations that were only meant to guide our well-being.
Like judging the stick is really bent based on the visual sensation.
Right. Or errors can happen due to the body's mechanics, like the example of someone with dropsy feeling thirsty even when hydration would be harmful. The bodily signal is misleading in that specific condition. God isn't deceiving us, it's just that our composite nature isn't perfect or immune to physical malfunction. The system is generally reliable for survival, and we have reason and other senses to correct errors.
Okay, that makes sense. The senses are for survival guidance, not perfect scientific readouts of reality's essence. And this finally lets him tackle the dream doubt again.
Yes. Now that he has God, the external world, and this understanding of the mind-body union, he has a way to be certain he's awake. The key is memory and coherence.
How so?
Waking experiences connect together. Memory links present perceptions consistently with the whole course of his life. Events follow cause and effect in a coherent way. Dreams, on the other hand, are usually disconnected, fragmented, and don't fit coherently with the rest of life's narrative.
So the continuity and consistency of waking life is the distinguishing feature.
Right. And because God is not a deceiver, when all his faculties, senses, memory, understanding examine and experience and find it coheres perfectly with everything else without contradiction, he can be certain he's not dreaming and not being deceived about that experience. The non-deceiving God guarantees that this coherence is a reliable sign of reality.
Okay, so he's finally achieved certainty about waking reality. But I assume Hobbes had a final word on this too.
You bet. Hobbes challenges the idea that God cannot deceive at all. He brings up examples like a doctor tricking a patient into taking medicine or a parent tricking a child for their own good. He says this shows deception isn't always bad and can be beneficial, so Descartes' link between perfection and absolute non-deception might be too strong.
Interesting point. Did he challenge the dream argument solution too?
Yes. Hobbes argues that an atheist, who doesn't believe in God, can still use memory and coherence perfectly well to tell waking from dreaming. Therefore, Hobbes concludes, certainty about waking doesn't actually depend on knowing God, contrary to Descartes' claim.
So how does Descartes respond to those last jabs?
On deception, Descartes distinguishes. God's nature prevents a malicious will to deceive that would make our faculties inherently faulty. The kind of deception Hobbes mentions is for a specific good, temporary, and doesn't imply our fundamental nature is flawed. Regarding the atheist, Descartes concedes an atheist can use coherence as a practical guide to distinguish waking from dreaming in everyday life.
But it's just a catch.
Yes. The atheist can never be metaphysically certain that coherence is a sufficient or guaranteed sign of truth, because he doesn't know the ultimate source of his being. He can't rule out the possibility of a fundamental deception, like the evil deceiver, without knowing he was created by a non-deceiving God who ensures his faculties can reach truth when used properly. Also, Descartes adds, someone dreaming can dream that things cohere, but only someone awake can actually connect experiences reliably across time and recognize past dreaming coherence upon waking.
Wow. Okay, that was quite a journey, from doubting absolutely everything
His own existence, the world, even math. Yeah.
to finding that one anchor point. I think, therefore I am, the cogito.
That absolute certainty in the thinking self.
And then using the idea of God within his mind, arguing for God's existence not just once, but twice.
With both a causal argument and the ontological argument.
Yeah. Establishing God as this perfect, non-deceiving guarantor of truth.
Which then allowed him to finally reclaim the existence of the external physical world.
And clarify that complex relationship between the distinct mind and body, yet their intimate union in human experience.
It's an incredible intellectual edifice he builds, step by logical step, always trying to address the doubts, especially those sharp points raised by Hobbes.
Yeah, having Hobbes' objections really highlights the pressure points in the arguments.
Definitely. It aimed to create this bedrock of certainty for all knowledge, starting with the self, grounded in God, extending out to the world.
Hopefully this deep dive has given everyone listening some, aha moments and a clearer picture of what Descartes was trying to achieve.
And maybe some appreciation for how revolutionary these ideas were at the time.
Absolutely. It leaves you thinking, though, if Descartes is right, that our senses are primarily geared for survival, for telling us what's good or bad for us, rather than revealing the true objective essence of things.
Yeah.
What does that imply?
What does that mean for how we perceive reality every day? Are we seeing the world as it truly is in its, mathematical essence? Or are we mostly seeing it through a filter shaped by our biological needs and practical concerns?
That's a deep question to ponder. Are we experiencing reality directly, or are we experiencing a kind of user interface designed for the human organism?
Something to definitely mull over until our next deep dive.